does some lives matter more than others? For most people, the idea of a loved one vanishing, being murdered is beyond comprehension. But it's a scenario that is too familiar for many First Nations communities. And who'd ever thought that it ever happened to you or to us? Because, life's quite blasé. Get around the community, you travel, and who'd ever think it'd happen to you? And it's like anything else in life. Who'd ever think it'd happen to you? When a non-Indigenous woman dies or a non-Indigenous person is murdered, it's a front page article. East Coast with the Jetstar pilot, those two old couples, the Murphy cases in Perth. When a black woman or a man dies or is murdered, you don't hear about it that much. And this now applies to young Indigenous men that have gone and missing in West Australian states north. Despite calls from a Senate inquiry in January last year into murdered and missing First Nations people, and in particular women, and with a petition that was formally tabled in West Australia's Parliament, there's no resolution until government police justice system, leaving First Nations people can't feel that some lives may matter more than others. The statistics are scary here in Western Australia and Australia. Since 2022, there's been 68 Indigenous women and 124 Indigenous men believed to be missing or murdered. 23 of the 192 total are under the age of 18. And that's from 2 years ago. So this number has now risen. I'm trying to take the emotions out of what we're talking about, even though it's difficult as it is, because a lot of family members are here, including my sister. But my nephew went missing from our community. We reported to the police, and 1 week later, as most of our Aboriginal kids tend to travel throughout the Pilbara visiting family. And that's one of the stereotypes that the West Australian police seems to have. That, no, young black kid, go and walk about. And that's the perception that we have within the police force. But this also coincided with 2 other Indigenous males from the northwest that was missing on the same month of October. A young Lockyer boy from Rovan and a young Aboriginal male from Fitzroy Crossing. Whilst we appreciate that the police in Port Hedland immediately activated and coordinated a search radius for these boys that are missing, helicopter drones, night vision, emergency services was provided for the search. But after the 7th day, police concluded that they had not been found and the search would be suspended. And as I mentioned, we really appreciated that the WA police, in their efforts to conduct the searches, questions still remain: should the police have done more? Police will simply pass on the matter to the missing persons unit, and that's where pretty much it sits. So does some lives matter more than others? So early in January 2023, some 3 months after these boys went missing, I represented a lot of the families, met with the Minister for Police, who's probably the Deputy Commissioner of Police, Paul Papalia, Deputy Premier Roger Crook at the time, and our local member Kevin, who's here today, plus senior reps of the WA Police Force in Perth, to request the WA government to place a reward for those missing young Indigenous males, including my nephew Wesley. Now, the West Australian government put out in a front page article at the time that they would start offering rewards for cold case murders or cold case missing persons. And that was more or less the approach that we did to the government was, okay, we know there's cold case murders. We know there's cold case missing persons. So what's the chances of offering these rewards for our missing kids up in the northwest? Now, this was unfortunately to no avail because the police concluded rewards for information require a number of criteria to be met, including the establishment of criminality. No criminality had been established in this matter of time, despite 6 kids missing. Investigations into their whereabouts continue. Now, despite this overrepresentation of missing person cases, First Nation cases rarely make national headlines. We've been reminded of this in the missing case near Carnarvon in 2021. After 18 days of dedicated police work and media coverage, the offering of $1 million reward and over 1,000 community calls to Crime Stoppers, the nation, including me, rejoiced in finding this beloved little girl. This same opportunity, this same offer was not offered in April this year to a Stevens boy that went missing in Broome. Despite evidence to the contrary on Facebook, media coverage, no reward was offered. No reward was offered for young Clinton Lockyer in Roman. No reward was offered for Wesley Lockyer in Edlin. No reward was offered for the Oscar boy in Fitzroy Crossing. The Rivers boys has gone missing. The Shar boy in Geraldton. 0. And yet, we've just got a recent case up in Broome where Facebook was absolutely flooded with information. Not one single dollar, not one reward given by the West Australian government or the West Australian police force. Now you talk to the police, it's ongoing investigation. And like I said, we all rejoiced in finding that little girl. We had the Rockstar Premier flying with his plane into Carnarvon. You know, cameras are clicking, media flying everywhere. Rejoice, rejoice, rejoice. We know what happened to that detective that was leading that case. But sadly, not all searching for those missing children will experience the same outcome. And that's where all our families are at right now. You know, even our families offered the West Australian government to pay for the reward. You know, it's not $1 million, but loose lips and ships. Perhaps if we'd have thrown some money out early, there could have been information for finding our loved ones. Yet, in April 2020, 17th of April 2023, 7 days after I wrote this article, the West Australian Police placed a reward of $25,000 for information leading to fires that occurred north of the town of Port Hedland for a possible arsonist, because there was fires all around that Bunina area. Our families have approached lead detectives on the case and the West Australian Police to provide further information on the case to no avail. We advised that any information required had to be filed through the Freedom of Information process. And look, I get that, because obviously when you're leading an investigation, you know, police want to keep matters private to lead, so there's no innuendos going or no finger pointing, blame at possible suspects. Now, a lot of our families, including ours, we hired through our own costs and through our group, private investigators, canine tracker dogs to assist in the case of finding both young Wesley and Clinton. And it should not be the responsibility of a grieving family to seek justice and answers when you have got the government and the law enforcement that fail us. And you cannot find a more clear case than what happened to that young Stevens boy up in Broome. Had it not been for their family getting on Facebook, chasing up CCTV coverage, chasing other individuals, this would have been just another case forgotten, and we move on. It's just another black kid in our community. It is a community and government responsibility to award the same attention, empathy, and mobilisation of resources to bring home all our missing children, or at the very least bring closure to their families, regardless of their cultural identity. And the greatest irony is that as we sit here today with our fallen faces and our sadness, watching a sister, other family members go through this grief, the scariest thing right now, right this second, is that those perpetrators are still out there. They are still in our community. Who's next? Whose kid is next? 6 children. You know, you read that West Australian article that the government put out, and it plastered people murdered, missing, and 60-70% of them were Aboriginal, young men and women. That was in that article that are still missing to this day. And the other irony is that the Pilbara, we've delivered 2 premiers. Peter Dowding, who sought our community's votes to enter politics, into Parliament, later became Premier. And the greatest irony is that Yamaji Marlva, that is running this bush meeting today, and have been for the last few years, is the CEO of Yamaji Marlva was Roger Cook. So we've delivered 2 premiers. And we've delivered parliamentarians that have ridden on the coats of blackfellas. Tom Stevens, Tony McRae, still working with us. This Labor government needs a shake-up because they have ridden on the coats of us and delivered squat. So, as the call of action, and my sister put together as a petition, is to reform the classification and procedures for missing persons in Western Australia. She's put to the President and the members of the Legislative Council of the Parliament of Western Australia that is assembled. I think the petitions are flying around yesterday, so if you haven't signed it, I'm not sure where they are. They're at the WIMAC table here. Please make sure that you sign it. So we want to bring to the attention and the urgent need for a comprehensive investigation into the disappearances of Wesley Lockyer, Clinton Lockyer, Wylie Oscar, Zane Stevens, and Brenton, Shar and Jordan, all missing Indigenous peoples from the Kimberley to the Midwest areas in Western Australia. Our petition seeks to address the calls for the family of the missing individuals, local communities and adversary groups requesting a thorough ongoing investigation. There's a growing concern for the West Australian Police to intensify their efforts and resources in these investigations. The decision to treat these as individual missing persons cases rather than a potential linked series of events has caused stress and frustration for the families. There's an underbelly happening in this northwest of missing kids. The families and the communities believe a broader, more interconnected investigation may be more effective in uncovering the truth. We therefore ask the Legislative Council to recommend the government, 1, generate an MOU between the West Australian Police and other investigation agencies to enable the sharing of information currently limited by the Freedom of Information Act, thereby giving access to a greater number of resources. 2, revision of the classification of a missing person to a suspicious disappearance after 1 month. This will allow access to national resources and databases, improving the chances of locating missing persons sooner. Establishing a specialised task force dedicated to these cases to ensure a focused and thorough investigation, not just flicking it to the missing persons unit. You know, we've got a bikie gang squad, we've got a Middle Eastern gang squad, we've got drug squads, but we don't seem to have a missing person squad. And finally, implement rewards. As I said, loose lips sink ship. And I mentioned earlier, there's an underbelly of drug running in this northwest that is just out of control. Offer rewards for information when a person has been missing for 3 months onwards, in conjunction with regular public awareness campaigns and engagements with local communities. The community stands united in their demand for answers and justice. As I said, which kid is next? Could be any people sitting here. Your kid's going to be next. We urge the Parliament to take immediate action to improve the procedures and classifications related to missing persons in Western Australia. Thank you for your time in considering this petition, and we hope that members of Parliament and representatives go back to your ministers or your local members that will act swiftly to enhance the safety and well-being of all residents in Western Australia. And your petitioners, as in duty bound, will ever pray. Thank you.